Hello and welcome to Lisa T Creations. I'm Delisa behind Lisa T Creations, and whether you're new or a returning subscriber, I welcome you to the channel. So I've had to take a bit of a break because as usual, things happen in my life that causes a bit of rearranging to be done. And so, as you can see from the background, I've had to move my studio to a different part of my house, and the space is a lot smaller and it's a lot more cramped, but we're gonna make do, because the reason behind the move is very important. So however, now that I'm all settled in my new space, I can begin sewing again. And so what I wanted to show, this video is going to be all about how to make, man, I just got dusty, how to make this address book cover. And so it has this nice plastic snap closure, and it is quilted. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it is quilted. And it is also, let me take the address book out of it. It is also fully lined, as you can see. So the address book that I bought because I got caught without my cell phone, and I didn't have any of my important numbers with me, and I didn't have them committed to memory. And so I bought this ugly little cheapo depot address book from Walmart, so I thought I will just sew a cover to go with this. Now this cover is very beginner friendly, which is why I wanted to make a video about how I made it. So in today's video, we are going to make this address book cover, and I'm so excited to be showing you this. Now with this particular address book, you can do the snap closure, or you can leave the closure off altogether, or you can use Velcro. Whatever you have on hand, it's your choice. So let's get started on everything you need to make this address book. So first, let's talk about the tools you're gonna need. So you're gonna need some rulers. I have two different sizes of rulers here. One is an 18-inch and one is a 24-inch ruler. You do not need rulers this long unless your fabric is full length. You're going to need some cutting tools. I have my rotary cutters and my scissors, just in case I need to cut something. You're going to need a marking pen for this as well. I have a friction pen that races with heat. And then if you're using the snaps, you're going to need an awl for poking the hole in the fabric, the setting tool, and of course you are also going to need the snaps. So that is the tools that you're going to need for this. Again, if you're not putting the snap closure on there, if you don't have snap or tool, you can just use Velcro or leave off the closure whatsoever. Okay, so let's go over the type of material that you need. First, you're going to need some material for your outside. Now, I'm going to cut mine down to 10 by 15, so I have some wiggle room while I'm quilting it. If you do not want to quilt this, you can cut this down to size, which is 9.5 by 14. So for your inner lining, you need another piece of material. You can make them both the same if you want. I'm using two different fabrics. For the interior, you need to cut it to 9.5 by 14. And then if you're going to quilt it, you're going to need a piece of batting that is at least 11 by 16 to allow some wiggle room for the quilting. There are some additional pieces that you need to cut, and so you need two pieces of your outside fabric that are 9.5 by 2.5, and then you need two pieces of your inner lining that are 2.5 by 9.5, And these are going to be what keeps the address book in, so they're the flaps. And then you need 2 pieces that are 3 by 3 of your outer fabric. Now, if you're not doing a closure, you can skip this part, but these are additional pieces or additional cuts that you're going to need out of your fabric. So the first step is cutting our pieces. And let's see, and this is directional fabric. So I am just gonna fold this in half to make this a little bit easier because my space is so cramped. So for this, I'm gonna cut this down to 15. Okay, it's a good thing I got interrupted because I almost cut this wrong. So now that we have it 15 inches wide, we need to cut the top length down. And for that, we're going to need at least 10 and a half, very minimum 10 inches top to bottom, and I'm out of the frame. So let me get that ready. And I'm going to go with 10 and a half inches just to give some wiggle room when I am quilting it. Oops. Okay. Alright, so essentially that's going to make 2 pieces, but I can use that second piece for something else. But when you're finished, you're going to have a piece of your top fabric that's 10 and a half by 15 inches. So there's your top half. Okay, with this piece that was left over at the end, I'm going to make the cuts for my tab. And for this, I am going to cut it 3 inches wide. And then I'm going to cut 2 pieces. So essentially I'm making a 3 by 3 square. And so we have the 3 by 3 squares for the tab. Okay, so because I have cut this wrong already once, I am going to do this again with a top-down view, so I get it right. Okay, Since I cut it wrong the first time, let's see, I want the lighter color at the top. So I'm going to put that side over here, and I'm going to cut this 9.5 inches wide. And then I am going to cut it 14 inches wide. Okay, so this would be the interior, the lining piece. Okay, so for the batting, we don't need this to be too exact. So I am just gonna cut this down to 16 inches. So, and then I want it 11 inches wide, so it's larger than my top piece. So now I have one piece that is roughly 16 inches wide by 11 inches long, and that's going to be our batting. So now that we have the batting cut, we're going to place the top piece or the outside of the cover on top of the batting. And because I cannot sew straight to save my life, now I'm going to mark this with a heat Now we're going to go to the machine and quilt this. Okay, so I usually start in the middle. now that we have quilted this, we are going to press it to get rid of the white marks. And I can see right away I missed the whole line, but that's okay. I can put it in there, but for right now we're going to just iron this and get rid of the white lines. Okay, so now that we have it pressed, we can actually trim this down. I'm going to scoot that a little bit over the top mark. Okay, so the next step is marking where the snaps are going to be. If you're not going to use snaps, you can skip this step, but you want to turn this over to the wrong side, and then you're going to mark a line because it's 9.5 inches, so you're going to mark a line, and then in the middle, which would be 4.75 inches. So that's the first step, is marking that line in the middle. So that's your midpoint. And so you're gonna go at least 1.5 inches up from the bottom edge of this, and then you want to go 1.5 inches up, and then mark your dot. That's where we're gonna put the hole. But we want to go also make a mark here, and 1.5 inches the other way. So when we put that tab, we can center that tab between these two lines, because I'm hoping it just turns out to be 1 inch, but it might be a little bit bigger. So anyway, you're going to mark the back side of your quilted cover. And okay, so next step is to mark the back side. This is your tab for your closer. Flip it over to the wrong side, and again you want to find the center. In this case, you can go just finger pinch it and put a little seam in there, and then again you want to keep it out of the seam allowance, so you need to go at least 1/2 inch up from the center. So 1/2 inch up from the center. Actually, I'm going to go 3/4 of an inch just to make sure, so I can top stitch it. And then I have to with my pen. Well, I can't. There it is. So I'm going to make a mark right there. That's the hole we're going to put for the snaps. Okay. Okay, for the snaps, you need 2 of the top pieces, but these are going to be hidden inside, so you're not going to see them, but that's what they look like. And then you have the female receiver and the male snap. You need one of each. So for the top closure, I'm going to put the male snap in the top. So let me get out that and my awl. You're just gonna put a hole in that fabric where your dot is. And then because we want the male on this top, we're going to put the cover on the wrong side and the male on the top. And then your pliers have a place, the black side is where you put the top, and the clear side is what makes it stick. So once you got it seated in there good, you just squeeze it real hard. And there you go. That's all ready to go. So we can set that aside because that's ready to sew. Now we're going to repeat that process for the front side, for the front cover. We're going to get our little awl and put our hole in it. Now this one is going through more layers, so it might be a little harder to get that through there. Once you have your hole, this time you're going to put, again, you're going to put the cap on the front, on the wrong side, and the receiver on the front side. Sorry, I was out of the frame. And again, just squeeze it. And you are all ready to go. Now you have your snap in place. So just to make sure, I am going to make sure my snap stays in place. And it does. These are, I mean, I guess it's because it's new, they're really hard. As long as your snap's working, we're ready to go on to the sewing part. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is make the tab for the closure. And now I have opted to do a little bit bigger closure on this one. So you want to put them right sides together, and then you need to make sure that your tab is going to be at the top. So you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam up this side, across, and then down. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so there you go. And we're going to trim the threads. And because we want nice points, what we're going to do is cut off the corners. Be careful of your seam line and don't cut your sewing. If you want, you can also narrow that down on the sides like that, but it's not required. It just might give you a little smoother point, or a sharper point. And now we're going to turn this right sides out. And I'm going to use this scoring tool to push out the corners. Alright, so there you go. There's your closure tab, and it's all ready to sew in place. So I actually marked that on the wrong side. You need to mark the opposite side of your snap, and that's where we're going to baste and place the little tab for the closure. So basically you want to find your center, and then I'm going to put a pin in it so I don't have to mark it. Find your center there, and then you want to also find the center of your tab. I'm just going to pin it. And then you want to flip this over to the right side, and then line up. You can't really see. Let me do it this way. You're going to line up your raw edges with the snap facing this way. So line up those raw edges, and you can either pin it in place, or you can use clips. I have pins because I was trying to find the center, so I'll just use pins. And now we are going to baste across this 1/8 of an inch. So the next step that we have to do is to prepare those flaps that are going to hold it inside the cover. So we're going to take one of our lining pieces that are 2.5 by 9 and one of our outer fabrics that 2.5 by 9, and we're going to place them right sides together. Now, if you have directional fabric like I do, you might want to pay attention to that so you don't sew your directions wrong side out. And then we're just going to sew them just one side together with a 1/4 inch seam. Now be aware that these are going to be mirror images. So this side has to go on this side, on this side of the inner lining. So when we sew this one together, if we want them to go correctly, we're going to have to sew them together on this side so the directions will be correct. So I'm going to sew the other two together. Alright. So now what we're going to do is take these pieces and take them over and press them open. So now to get these to lay flat, oops, I forgot to snip off, gotta snip your threads. I forgot to snip my threads on these. So I'm gonna do that first. Snip these threads. Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and press the seams. Press the seams down, and then we're gonna turn these and press them like this. That way there's no raw edges visible on the flaps. And I press these towards the purple side, but you can do it however feels comfortable with you, for you. And now the butterflies will be up, and they'll lay nicely on the inner lining. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go over and top stitch these. You can use an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch, just top stitch along these lines. And I'm going to do that off camera. Okay, now, so now we're ready to start putting this together. So you're going to lay out your lining fabric first, and then this one, be careful of your directions. So this one will go right here and line up those edges right there. Line up all those raw edges right there. And then you're going to do the same thing with this side. Line up your raw edges. Now if you are brand new to sewing, you can baste an 1/8 of an inch around these seams first to keep them in place. I feel comfortable being not doing that, and so I'm just going to add the top. Now it's important that you add this top where the snap is going to be right there. So put your and put it right sides together with your snap at the top, and then you're going to clip all the way around, leaving a space about this, and if you want to, you can mark that where you leave that space. That's not a good marking pencil, but you can leave a space to remind yourself not to sew around that. So I'm just going to make sure all your raw edges are lined up good, and that your flap is pushed back so it doesn't get caught in the seam line. And then you just clip these together. Alright, so now that we have these all clipped and held in place, we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew all the way around, leaving a 1/4 inch gap at the bottom. Or a 4 or 5 inch gap at the bottom for turning. Okay, let's get started. Because this seam is going to take a little bit of pressure, I am going to back stitch on this. Okay, so now that we have finished sewing it, what we need to do before we turn it out is kind of trim the corners. But first, I'm going to make sure that I turn it over and make sure I got everything inside this seam line. Because you see right there, something slipped out of balance, and that is not inside the seam line. So I'm going to have to redo that seam. So I'm going to fix this and I'll be right back. Okay, I corrected that, and I'm not really sure what happened. I don't know if this bottom piece was a little bit off, but we're going to go with it because I already have it sewed together. So we're just going to trim those corners to get rid of some of the bulk. So when we turn it, it'll have sharper points. So we're going to do that to all 4 corners. Now you can adjust these measurements to fit your whatever size address book that you've purchased. You just need to add 2 inches to the width to allow for the for how a book folds, and 1 inch top to bottom to allow for seam allowances. And now I'm going to trim my threads away. Okay, threads trimmed, and now I'm going to turn this right side out through that hole. Just going to reach in there and grab that corner. And pull that all out. Okay, here we go. Going to pull out those corners. Make sure that your flaps end up on the lining side. Okay, so now before we press it and sew this bottom part closed, I'm going to take my little score tool here and see if I can sharpen up these corners just a little bit. You want to press those corners out, but not press hard enough to poke through your seam or your fabric. I'm going to do that on all 4 corners. Now, just because there's a lot of bulk here, I'm also going to go inside the flap and kind of press a little bit inside the flap, just so you can get a nice... the corners for this, because there's so much bulk, it's going to be rounded just a little bit, but that's okay. Okay, so now we are going to press this flat, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around. And make sure you flip it over. Give it a good press from both sides. Alright, once you've done that, we're ready to go and top stitch all the way around to close this. We're going to use I'm going to do at least an eighth of an inch. Okay, so now we are at the moment of truth, and we'll see if all my measurements were correct. So now we're going to take this lovely little address book and stick it in there. And there you go. It fits. Although I think I should have probably used 3 inches over here, because this is a little bit loose, but it will stay in there. But it is just a tiny bit loose. But once you start putting paper and stuff in there, it should be just fine. And so there you go. There is the finished address book cover. That is just really cool. And that's what it looks like on the back. So we are all done. Well, that's a wrap on our address book cover tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed that and that you were able to follow along with my instructions. This is my first ever sewing tutorial. So it's been a challenge to try to get this thing done. And it's taken me more than one day, filming across multiple days, to try to get this all put together for you. So I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it helps you make your own address book cover, and that you'll join me for my next video. And again, I always thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate you being here.